In today's video, I'm asking the question, have vendors gone too far when it comes to software subscriptions? It seems we're paying through the nose, and the big question is, how long are you prepared to do it? Stay tuned, and I'll answer your questions. Today's video is sponsored by eNow. Don't risk a data breach. Uncover unknown SaaS apps, risky permissions, and misconfigurations in minutes with your free AppGov score for Entra ID. Visit appgovscore.com today for more details. Hi everyone, Andy here. So nice to see you. I really do appreciate you dropping by. So long gone are the days where we used to physically own our software. Do you remember that? Where we had CDs or DVDs, or remember even floppy disks that contained software. We went out, we purchased it, and we had that perpetual license for it. Well, that's long gone. So with organizations like Adobe, Microsoft, Amazon and so on, everything is by subscription nowadays. And of course the big question is, how much are you willing to pay and how long is it going to go on for? So I don't know about you, but I remember when I was a kid, if you can remember that far back, and we used to have TVs. We used to actually go out and rent a TV. I remember Granada TV rentals here in the UK, and we used to rent our TV for a year or even 2 years. Pretty much like we do with mobile devices today. And then every 2 years we would get a new TV, which was very, very exciting, of course. And then, of course, came the VHS and the Betamax video revolution, if you remember that. And we used to rent video recorders, and that was the rise of the blockbuster video rentals. We used to go out and rent our movies. And then, of course, that kind of model changed down the line when we could actually go out and buy our own VHS copies of movies and eventually, of course, DVDs. Big thing then was vinyl and CDs. We actually had physical copies of music, physical movies that we could actually own. And to be fair, you can still do that today. But the thing is, we actually owned the software, we owned the movies, we owned the all that kind of stuff. We had physical stuff, which was great. Of course, all that's changed now. Personally, you know, you might have a Spotify subscription, Apple Music. You might have an Amazon subscription, which can give you free delivery on Amazon products. Plus, you also get the subscription for their movies and TVs and their music as well, all entwined into that Amazon, that loyalty, that guarantee that you're going to spend more money with them. Software, of course, as I've said, we don't have perpetual licensing for software. So I remember having copies of Microsoft Office on something like, I think it was like 24 floppy disks. And it would always fail on disk 23 or something like that. Well, I remember that. But now, of course, with BPOS, as it was then, or the Business Productivity Online Suite, which was later renamed as Office 365, and of course now it's Microsoft 365. It's all subscription based. So as long as you pay your subscription, it's a bit like going into a hotel. You have your room for the night or however long you want it. It's maintained, there's good security, there's good functionality. But ultimately, when you close that door behind you, it's ready for another tenant to move in. And again, personally or professionally, you know, you might have an Azure subscription, Amazon, Google, something like Canva for graphics. And for God's sake, you might even have a HP Instant Ink subscription. Instant Ink, imagine, now you're even renting ink. So you can get cartridges, and this is not cheap. You know, you get a cartridge, you stick it in the printer and it prints on demand. But it's not just a subscription. They actually ask you how many copies are you going to produce. So the more you print, the more you pay. Yeah, so gone are those cartridges that kind of cost you, you know, $20 or something. Now it can be very, very expensive. And of course, if you decide that you don't want instant ink, what's going to happen? It will stop printing. Of course, yes, you can then throw that cartridge away, which is kind of protected, and you can go out and buy a regular cartridge. But it's an interesting concept, isn't it? So when we talk about Microsoft 365, of course, there are versions for everyone. There's the home editions, the student editions, business basic, of course, which is pretty darn basic. You've got business standard, and of course, business premium. And the interesting thing about these products is they're premium, but they don't include all of their products. So, for example, a recent ruling with the European Union, for example, mentioned that Teams is no longer included. You have to give people a choice. So I might want to go out and put Zoom in or some other option. And of course, having Teams is no longer enough. Now you need to go out and purchase Teams Premium if you want all the whistles and bells. And on top of that, we've now got Copilot, Microsoft 365 Copilot, $20 per user with a yearly commitment for smaller businesses and $30 for premium customers. That's if you've got an E5 subscription, and that's $30 per year on top of your Microsoft 365 subscription. So that you were looking at 12-month commitment, $54.75 per month per user for an E5 subscription. That's $1,200 per year. If you want Teams, of course, it's an extra $5 and then another $30 for Copilot. So you're really kind of starting to stroke the $100 per user per year. That's $1,200 per user. If you've got 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 users, yes, there are discounts to be made, and I'm going to make a little video on that in due course. But when you start adding up those figures, it seems insane. And I actually wonder how many organizations out there now are starting to think about, that big question, are there any alternatives? So in the old days, in the 1980s and the 1990s, it was all about personal computers on our desks. And that was the original mission of Microsoft. Bill Gates said, I want to have a Windows PC on everybody's desk. And of course, then in the 90s, it was, we want to have everybody connected to the internet. And of course, now that whole model has changed with the arrival of the likes of Satya Nadella and Apple, of course. They've made huge inroads into subscription computing with their AI platform just about to be launched as a premium service as well. So when you look at the add-ons for Microsoft 365, of course, having Intune with that E5 subscription is no longer enough. You might need the Intune suite if you want things like remote help, which you would think is a basic feature of Microsoft Intune. The whole point of having remote management is the ability that you can offer help, but no, you've got to pay extra for that. Then, of course, when it comes to the Entra ID platform, yes, we'll authenticate you, but you might need a P2 license for one feature, or you might need the Entra suite if you want to do things like access reviews or entitlement management. You get the idea. So those monthly fees are kind of really starting to kind of rack up, aren't they? Now, to be fair, yes, if you are a non-profit, you can make up to 35% savings per month. And of course, education plans are also cheaper. But when you kind of think, we went from that personal computer in the 1990s, we had the client server environment. So what did we have? We had Windows NT, you had Windows Server, and the infrastructure, it was almost like your house. You maintained it, it was on your premises, and it's great. But somewhere along the lines, that has become blurred, and the vendors are now saying, no, you're actually safer within our data centers. You store your data within our data centers, which of course, no offense against the US, but is pretty much dominated by the big US giants. Microsoft, Amazon, Google, all those big US vendors, they're essentially controlling something like 80 to 90% of the world's traffic. And you have to ask that, is that kind of ethical and is it correct? Even now, you're probably thinking, well, Andy, is there a way to kind of go back to on premises? Well, yes, people are starting to look at alternatives. Linux is starting to really gain a lot of traction, a lot of attention. Of course, you've got Office alternatives like LibreOffice and OpenOffice, which, to be fair, actually do a pretty good job. And of course, they're non-cloud based, so you have that control. But when it comes to servers, it's interesting to see that even Microsoft, they're just launching their new Windows Server 2025 and their Exchange Server SE Edition. SE Edition, Andy? What does that mean? You got it. Subscription edition. That's right. You're going to have to subscribe to many of these services. So the question is, are Microsoft shooting themselves in a foot here? In fact, are the cloud vendors starting to shoot themselves in a foot? And it's actually interesting. I don't know if you've visited your local music store recently, but I was in there and suddenly vinyl is king again. CDs are king again. People are buying DVDs because they want to have physical copies of things. So it's going to be interesting to see if things kind of go that full circle again. I would love to know what you think. What are your thoughts on this? Where do you think that the industry is kind of going to go? It's going to be a fascinating journey. And I got to say, it's going to be an interesting one, I think. Hey, listen, I really hope you enjoyed this session. And let's keep that debate going because it really is an interesting debate. And I really appreciate you joining me here today. Questions and comments, get them down below. And of course, if you've not subscribed to the channel, you know what to do. Bump that subscribe button and give me a big like. I really do appreciate it. I'm Andy Malone. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'll catch you next time. Take care.